Does weight loss ever feel impossible? I know it did for me. It wasn't until I stopped forcing my life to fit around extreme diet rules, and I instead found a way to make weight loss fit into my life, that everything finally clicked. And that's when I realized the problem wasn't me. It was the way I was approaching weight loss. So in this video, I'll break down what changes I made to lose 50 pounds, and more importantly, how I finally managed to keep it off. Plus, I'll share all of the things no one tells you about losing weight, like what actually works. Because if I'd known these things from the start, I would have saved myself years of frustration. And let's start with the number one weight loss lie I believed for decades. I used to think losing weight meant spending hours on cardio machines. Like, if I wasn't sweating buckets at least 6 days a week, I wasn't doing it right. Turns out, all that sweating actually made weight loss harder. Even though cardio is great for your health, it's actually not that great for fat loss. While weight loss does come down to calories in versus calories out, all of that intense cardio doesn't burn as many calories as you think. And once your body adapts to your daily sweat sessions, then you're burning even less. But does that mean you can just sit around eating chips and still lose weight? Technically yes, but also no. Because while a calorie deficit is what drives fat loss, movement makes the whole process easier. In fact, people who stay active are 2 to 3 times more likely to keep the weight off than those who are sedentary. And once you throw strength training into the mix, now you've got a foolproof fat loss plan, since building muscle boosts your metabolism so you burn more calories at rest. Which means if you do have an occasional lazy day, you're not completely derailing your progress. Something I wish I learned much sooner is that the key to long-term fat loss isn't busting your butt with extreme workouts. It's more moderate movement in the right ways, which is how you make weight loss sustainable and actually keep it off. But wait, if you're not killing yourself in the gym, how are you supposed to burn enough calories to lose weight? Well, the obvious answer is to eat less. And since up to 90% of weight loss comes down to what you eat, eating less is a rule that you have to follow. But here's what no one tells you. Eating too little can backfire. I know this from experience after making this mistake for years. In previous diets, I'd cut my calories super low, thinking I'd lose weight faster. And I did for like 2 weeks. Then reality hit, with me always turning into a hangry, exhausted mess who only thought about food 24/7. And we all know what happens next. The weekend binge. Once Friday rolled around, I'd find myself eating everything in sight. Then came the guilt, followed by a promise to start fresh on Monday. This cycle is exactly what happens when you slash calories too low. Your body fights back with extreme cravings that lead to binges, which erase all of the progress you made. Once I stopped cutting calories to 1,200 a day and instead began eating enough to fuel my body, sure, I lost weight at a slower pace, but following this type of plan helped me finally make it to my goal. And since I kept calories higher while dieting, that means my maintenance calories are also higher, which makes maintaining my 50-pound loss so much easier. While you may not be able to lose weight while eating 2,000 calories a day, the key to sustainable weight loss is to find a moderate deficit that works for you. Even though your scale won't drop as quickly with a moderate deficit, think of all the time you're saving when you're not constantly quitting your diet that is way too hard to stick to and starting from scratch once Monday rolls around. But just because you have to eat less, that doesn't mean you're stuck eating food you hate. For years, I lived off plain chicken breast, green veggies, and sadness just to get my scale to budge. And yeah, it worked, but only until I found myself face first in all of the foods I actually wanted, which always sent me right back to square one. But once I stopped forcing myself to follow strict diet rules and instead made my diet fit into my life, that's when everything changed. These days, I eat everything I love while losing weight. Burgers and fries, at least once a week. Nachos, 1 to 2 days a week. Desserts like rice cake s'mores, every single night. But there is a trick to eating more of what you love while losing weight, which is making high protein versions of your favorite meals. Like these beef nachos that have 47 grams of protein and only 516 calories. And even though treats like rice cake s'mores aren't exactly high in protein, they fit into my day since I spend the rest of the day filling up on protein-packed, nutrient-dense foods that keep me full. Sustainable weight loss is never about cutting out all of the foods you love. It's about balancing them with real, filling foods so you can enjoy treats without completely ruining your progress. This is important because if your diet feels like a punishment, you'll never stick to it long enough to get results. But just because I eat high protein, nutrient-dense foods, that doesn't mean that I'm never hungry. In fact, feeling a little hungry at times is actually a good sign since that tells me I'm in a calorie deficit. And since hunger is my body's way of saying it needs energy, I never ignore it completely. But before I eat, I ask myself, am I actually hungry or am I just bored? If I am truly hungry, a high protein meal or snack is the best way to stay on track. But if my brain keeps screaming for junk food, then I know that's not real hunger. It's either a habit or my emotions talking. Learning to recognize real hunger versus emotional eating was a total game changer. One thing that helps me stay on track is always having high protein, nutrient-dense foods on hand so I don't reach for junk food whenever real hunger hits. And here's my personal rule. I stick to these foods throughout the day, only allowing myself a treat at night. But I'll only have a treat if I already hit my protein goal and eating dessert doesn't blow my calorie budget. So while I used to dread hunger, I see it differently now. Because while hunger isn't the enemy, you do need to understand which foods keep you full so your hunger stays manageable and you don't end up overeating. But there is a reason we always eat too much of the foods we love. And if you ignore that reason, you'll never reach your goal. Because 80% of weight loss happens right here. And almost no one talks about how mental this process really is. Here's the truth. Changing lifelong habits is hard. But that's exactly what you have to do if you want a fat loss plan that actually sticks. Sure, you could lose 20 pounds this month with some crazy fad diet, but how long do you think you'll actually keep the weight off? Because any diet that helps you lose weight fast is almost never sustainable past a few months. If you want real long-term results, then there's two things that you have to understand. First, the habits that help you lose weight have to be the habits that you can stick with pretty much forever. Second, you need patience since expecting everything to change overnight is a recipe for disaster. But when you shift your mindset and realize fitness is a lifelong journey, not something you can quit after a 75-day challenge, that's when you finally start seeing results that last. But if you keep torturing yourself into quick weight loss, you'll never stick with it long enough to see any real, lasting changes. But you may be wondering, how am I supposed to be patient when I just want to cry every time I walk past a mirror? Trust me, I get it. After regaining 50 of the 100 pounds I lost, I felt hopeless and I thought I would never get back into a body I loved. And the worst part, every diet trick I used before only seemed to destroy my health, leading to a constant cycle of migraines, exhaustion, and even more weight gain. But here's what no one tells you. Losing weight doesn't fix your self-esteem overnight. Because if you hate your body at 200 pounds, you'll probably still find plenty things wrong with it at 150. Before I could lose a single pound of the weight I regained, I had to stop hating my body and start accepting it. Not for what I wanted it to be, but for what it was. And once I did that, that's when I stopped torturing myself with extreme diets. I finally accepted this is where I'm at, and it'll take time to get back to where I wanted to be. But rather than punishing my body with another strict diet, I began nurturing it instead with the habits that actually made me feel good. If you want to break free from that never-ending cycle of diet frustration, you have to understand that your self-worth is not tied to a number on the scale. And if stepping on that thing ruins your day, then get rid of it. Because that number means very little in the grand scheme of things. Instead of measuring your success by the scale, start measuring it by how you feel, how strong you are, and how well you're taking care of yourself, since that's what actually matters. But just because I finally realized if I wanted permanent results that I had to make permanent changes, That doesn't mean I went to bed one night and suddenly woke up a brand new person. And if that's the plan that you have in mind, then you have already failed before even getting started. Vowing to change every bad habit overnight never works. But when you start small with habits like walking 10 minutes after meals, or swapping out your favorite meals for lower calorie, higher protein versions, and you take 2 minutes before eating to track what's on your plate, these tiny habits add up to big results. More importantly, starting with just a few small habits makes your plan more sustainable. And sustainability beats speed every time. But if you keep expecting the scale to drop 2 pounds every single week, or else you failed, that mindset is setting you up for disappointment. Because real sustainable weight loss doesn't work like that. One day the scale might be down a pound, and the next it could be up 2. And if your scale is anything like mine when I first got started, it might not budge for months. But here's what you need to remember. Just because the scale isn't changing, that doesn't mean that you aren't changing. If I quit back in 22 just because my scale didn't move for 3 months, I never would have hit my goal. But you need to understand that when you finally commit to sustainable weight loss with a plan where you build muscle while losing fat, the scale won't always go down. But that doesn't mean that you're not making progress. If you keep quitting every time the scale stalls, you could be throwing away a plan that's actually working if you just had patience. Even though we've all been trained to measure success by the scale, that's actually the worst way since your weight fluctuates for a million different reasons. And most of those reasons have nothing to do with gaining or losing fat, like water retention, hormone fluctuations, muscle gain, or even how much food is sitting in your stomach. So instead of obsessing over daily numbers, focus on weight trends over time, how your clothes fit, and how you feel, since that's exactly what matters for a plan that works long term, which is the exact plan you need. Because if you want to quit struggling with your weight, then you have to establish these lifestyle habits long term. But the good news is, once you get into a routine you enjoy, you won't ever want to go back to the bad habits that kept you stuck. But you may be wondering, if extreme diets don't work, what does? After 40, your metabolism works differently than you think. Even though you've been told your metabolism just slows down as you age and there's nothing you can do about it, studies actually show that your metabolism doesn't even think about dropping until you're at least 60. And even then, it's not these big dramatic shifts that most influencers who peddle hormone programs will have you believe. So if you're gaining after 40, but you can't figure out why, I'm about to show you the exact reason, plus how you can actually fix it in as little as 15 minutes a day. So in this video, you'll finally understand why working harder after 40 won't work, but how working smarter will finally help you get into that body that you have been drooling over since your MTV spring break days. But if you keep slashing calories, giving up entire food groups, and spending what feels like days in intense cardio classes, then you'll only get as far as that stationary bike takes you. Before we get into the one thing that will finally save your metabolism, let's first talk about the lies that are keeping you stuck. Because there are 3 big lies everyone is telling busy moms who are just trying to do their best to fit it all in. The first lie is you just need to move more and eat less. This one drives me crazy. Like, if I had $1 for every time I heard this generic advice, I could retire and pay someone else to fold my kids' laundry. Because on paper, yes, you do need to be in a calorie deficit to lose weight. But what does move more, eat less even mean? Like, do I need to cut to 1,200 calories a day and hit the elliptical 6 days a week? But if that's what you take from that move more, eat less advice, then you are only headed for heartbreak and bigger jeans. Because here's what that advice leaves out. Your body adapts. So once you cut calories too low for too long, you're teaching your body how to survive on less calories while keeping your weight steady. And if you're trying to lose weight, holding at a steady weight on less calories kind of defeats the purpose. But that's exactly what happens since your metabolism downshifts, your energy tanks, and your cravings go nuts right before you find yourself rage eating an entire bag of chocolate chips while hiding from your kids in the pantry. So yeah, eat less and move more sounds cute until you're over 40, you can't slash calories any lower, and you're just too exhausted from just existing to even think about heading to the gym. The second big lie we're all told is carbs are the enemy after 40. No, Susan, carbs aren't the reason you're gaining weight. Even though slashing carbs might make the scale drop fast, that's not fat. It's just water weight that'll come right back the second you stand too close to a cookie. And sure, maybe you drop 5 pounds your first week on a very low carb diet, but is that really worth a huge energy crash, workouts that suck, and finding yourself one breadstick away from a full-on meltdown at the Olive Garden? While it's true carbs aren't necessary to survive like protein and fat, for busy moms over 40, they are necessary to thrive because they give you the energy to move, think, and not scream at your family over the lost remote that you're actually holding on to while screaming about losing the remote. But who would know, because you have zero carbs fueling your brain. And don't give me that your brain actually runs better on ketone garbage in the comments either. Because how was my brain running when I was too exhausted to even lift my head off the couch after stressing my body out from staying in ketosis for too long? When you cut all of the carbs to save your waistline, you also risk losing your mind, your muscle, and sometimes your will to live. The third big lie we're all told is you just need to get rid of, and then insert some garbage nutrition advice here. Like when some influencer with abs and zero life responsibility says, you just need to get rid of fruit. Fruit is what's making you fat. Or get rid of some of that protein because it is kicking you out of ketosis, which stops gluconeogenesis, duh. Okay, first of all, if someone ends a sentence with duh, they probably shouldn't be giving you health advice. And second, that's possibly the worst advice anyone could give to a woman over 40. Because the one thing that's keeping your metabolism from completely crashing is muscle. And you need protein to hang on to it. As women, we naturally start losing muscle every decade after 30. So unless you're doing strength training and eating enough protein to support that muscle, your metabolism is going down faster than your willpower at a kid's birthday party that has leftover cookie cake. Back when I was following strict keto, I was told to eat just 60 to 75 grams of protein for the entire day. But these days, I eat that much protein just with dinner. My metabolism has never been faster. So if anyone's telling you to just get rid of, insert something that your intuition is telling you doesn't feel right, please don't listen. Because you've made it this far in life based on your intuition. Sure, you may need some updated nutrition advice every now and then, but the basics that have kept people naturally thin for hundreds of years still matter. And if you think continuing to believe any of those lies isn't really hurting your fat loss efforts, I've got some really bad news. Because when you've been fed this low calorie, low carb, cardio all day, everyday advice for years, you end up doing everything you think is right on paper, but somehow you still find yourself gaining weight. And then what do? You blame yourself and assume that you're the problem, that you just need to try harder. You cut more, you move more, even if that comes at the expense of more stress and less sleep. But here's the real truth. You're not broken. But this approach where your focus is always on cutting instead of building is. Especially since all of that slashing and stressing, it's not the way to fix your metabolism, but it is the exact way to slow it down. And the more you follow these lies, the more your body clings onto fat like it is preparing for a huge famine. Because even if this routine worked in your 20s or 30s, after 40, your metabolism isn't powered by cardio or cutting calories. It's powered by muscle. And if you're not actively doing something to build and protect your muscle, you are basically handing your metabolism a one-way ticket to board the struggle bus. That's why even when you're eating like a bird and hitting your steps, nothing's changing. Because your muscle, the thing that burns more calories at rest, keeps your body firm, and helps your clothes fit better, is quietly disappearing with every passing year. But here's the best part. You're not just stuck with a slow metabolism because the clock struck 40, so now you're doomed. Trust me, I used to think the same way once my clock struck 40, and it seemed like I instantly regained 50 pounds. But once I quit blaming my hormones and instead hit the gym, I was able to build my metabolism to the point where I could easily eat up to 2,400 calories a day without gaining weight. And this was after struggling with weight gain while trying to keep calories under 1,500 for years. I promise you, I am not special. So if I can build my metabolism, you can rebuild yours. And the good news is, this doesn't even require 2-hour gym sessions or dripping sweat while flipping tires in a CrossFit box. Because all you really need is a solid 15 minutes a day of focused strength training. And that's it. 15 minutes to tell your body, hey, don't let go of this muscle because we still need it. And that one tiny shift to your daily routine, that's enough to wake your metabolism back up so your body uses food more efficiently, which means you can eat more while putting an end to that frustrating fat gain that seemed to show up out of nowhere once you hit 40. Now you understand why building muscle matters. But you're probably thinking, how can I eat more calories and still lose weight? Let me show you. While every influencer is screaming about their miracle method, keto, intermittent fasting, carnivore, or whatever else is trending this week, I did the exact opposite of what they all preach. I tracked calories. Dun dun dun! Not only do I track how many calories I eat, but I went from eating 1,500 calories while gaining weight to eating 2,000 calories a day, which is what helped me finally lose 50 pounds of fat that I couldn't get to budge for over 2 years. And this was me starting over as a 42-year-old mom who spent decades believing that I had to starve myself to get results. But once I understood why moderate calorie deficits work better than any extreme diet, everything changed. So in this video, I'll show you why eating more calories can help you lose fat, not just weight, and the simple system I use to figure out how much I should be eating to finally get results that last. Because I ain't ever going back. But if you're still convinced you need to follow some extreme plan that cuts out entire food groups, you'll just stay stuck in the same cycle that has been failing you for years. Because you're about to learn everything I wish I knew decades ago. After spending 30 years drowning in yo-yo diets, following every restrictive plan that promises quick results. But the dirty secret of all of these quick weight loss promises is, yes, you will lose weight fast on 1,200 calories and 0 carbs. But then what? Because you will gain it all back, plus more, the second that you try eating like a normal adult. And even though these diets aren't flat out telling you that you're eating less than a toddler while overly restricting carbs, protein, or whatever their quick method entails, that's exactly what's happening. Because when you're only allowed a few ounces of meat with a side of dry veggies at every meal, how many calories do you think you're eating? An even harsher truth is these extreme restrictions don't just slow your metabolism, but they also set you up for the exact binge and restrict cycle that keeps most women stuck forever. The good news is, I finally figured out a way to break that cycle, lose 50 pounds without extreme diets, and this time I am not struggling to keep it off. But before I show you what actually works, let's talk about the 3 biggest lies that are keeping you confused and stuck. The diet industry wants you to believe that if you're not suffering, that you're not trying hard enough. So you cut to 1,200 calories, throw away everything in your pantry that even has a hint of seed oil, or at least what you think is seed oil, because you're still not sure what that means and why seeds are keeping you fat. And then you white knuckle your way through strict rules for a few weeks, maybe lose a few pounds of water weight, only to find yourself face first in a bag of chips, wondering what's wrong with you. If any of that sounds familiar, I know exactly what happens next. You blame yourself. You think that you just need more willpower. And you wonder why none of these diets ever work for you, even though Susie Fitfluencer makes it look so easy. But here's what's really happening. Your body doesn't know that you're just trying to fit into your jeans. It thinks you're in a famine, and its job is to fight you every step of the way. And here's what your body really wants you to understand. all of these extreme restrictions that you're taking to lose weight aren't necessary. Your body is saying, listen, lady, you've got kids to take care of, a dog that just puked on the carpet, you are hardly giving me any nutrients for energy to scrub that, and you expect me to help you drop 30 pounds? And you don't want me to fight back? Good luck with that. But even if you somehow manage to stick to extreme restrictions, there's another big lie that is sabotaging your progress. And I know this from experience, since continuing to believe this lie sabotaged my progress for over 2 years, no matter how many red flags my body threw at me. Every influencer with MD credentials is screaming about how carbs spike your insulin, and since insulin makes you store fat, you obviously need to cut out all carbs if you want to lose weight. So you throw out your potatoes, avoid fruit like it's poison, and you feel guilty about putting a banana in your protein shake because some guy on Instagram said it would spike your insulin and ruin all of the progress you made over the past 3 weeks. So now you're dragging yourself through workouts with zero energy, wondering why you can barely lift the same weights that you used to crush, only to find yourself having strange dreams about bananas at 2 a.m. But instead of listening to the cues that your body is sending, you convince yourself that you just need to be more strict. So you cut even more carbs, only to continue this trend of getting weaker instead of stronger, even though Keto Karen makes it look effortless. But here's what's really happening. Yes, carbs raise insulin, but so do other macros like protein. Plus, all of the stress from following strict diet rules. How come none of these fitfluencers talk about that? Because your insulin spikes every single time all you can do is daydream about fruit, but you force yourself into a big bowl of broccoli instead. So even though carbs do raise insulin, you want to know what lowers insulin? Moving more and lifting weights. But here's the tricky part. Most women need more whole food carbs to have the energy to move more and also to lift heavy enough weights to build muscle. So while I'm not saying that you should just keep crushing bagels for breakfast, eating more whole food carbs strategically is a great way to build your metabolism up instead of constantly looking for new ways to keep tearing it down. But there's one more lie that's even more damaging than restricting calories or cutting carbs. And it's probably the reason that you have to start from scratch every single Monday. And this one kept me stuck longer than the other two combined. Every diet guru tells you that if you want results, you need to give up everything you enjoy while surviving on chicken, broccoli, and sadness forever. So you throw out all of the bad foods, meal prep like you're preparing for the apocalypse, and feel guilty every time you even think about pizza because clean eating Carol says that processed food is poison. So even though you go into your diet with the best intentions, it's not long before you find yourself obsessing over every food that you can't have, only to find yourself eating an entire sleeve of cookies right before bed, wondering how you got here again. Then everything falls back on you because you feel like a complete failure and question why you can't have the same discipline as Motivation Mary, who posts her perfectly portioned meals every day. But here's what's really going on. When you tell yourself that you can't have something, that is all your brain thinks about. But you have to quit viewing this as some sort of character flaw because it's really just basic human psychology. Once I started including all of the foods that I loved into my plan, that's when the constant cravings stopped. But you have to be strategic when it comes to including your favorites while losing weight. Like, I don't just wake up and have a few rice cake s'mores for breakfast. I focus on eating high-protein, nutrient-dense meals throughout the day. That way, I fill up on the good stuff with less calories, which leaves room for a few rice cake s'mores for dessert. But I'm not saying all of these fitfluencers are flat out lying to you, because everything they're teaching has worked for someone at some point, which is why they're getting views. But whether the lies are intentional or not, that doesn't mean that you won't stay stuck if you keep falling for them. Here's what all of these lies have in common. They're all based on the idea that faster is better, that you need to suffer to get results, and that extreme measures are the only way to lose weight. Extreme deficits backfire every time. When you slash calories too low, your body will always fight back. Your metabolism slows down to match your intake, your hunger hormones go haywire, your energy crashes, and your cravings become impossible to ignore. That's why I was gaining weight on 1,500 calories. My body quickly adapted to that low intake, and then I had nowhere left to go. I mean, I could have gone back to 1,200 or 1,300 calories a day, but as a 5'7" woman, I prefer to survive on more than just lean cuisines, sad salads made up of iceberg lettuce with a tomato, and Diet Coke. But once I increased my calories to reflect a moderate calorie deficit, which for my stats and activity level is around 2,000 calories a day, that's when my metabolism had room to work exactly like it's supposed to. Because I had energy for my workouts, my cravings were finally manageable, and the weight finally started coming off. Plus, I wasn't completely falling off the wagon every 2 or 3 weeks because what I was doing was way too hard. This moderate deficit, where I also focused on more high-protein foods, made me feel sane while losing weight. So here's exactly what I did and what you can do too. The first step is to calculate your moderate deficit. I used an online calculator to figure out roughly how many calories I burn in a day. Then, instead of slashing 500 to 800 calories like most diets suggest, I only cut 300 to 400 calories. Since I knew that I'd also be moving more, that's enough of a deficit to help me lose a solid pound of fat each week. And then I tracked everything I ate to see how my body responded. Not to be perfect, but just to get data. If I was losing about a pound a week, then I knew I was on track. If nothing was happening after 2 or 3 weeks, I'd make a small adjustment, maybe cutting another 100 to 150 calories a day. Nothing drastic, I just made slight tweaks. But here's the key to making this work. I wasn't expecting to lose 5 pounds every week like most crash diets promote. I was aiming to lose an average of a pound a week, knowing that some weeks would be higher while other weeks would be less. And here's what made all the difference. This time, I wasn't starving myself, so I could actually stick to this plan. And consistency beats perfection every time. Here's why this approach helped me finally reach my goal when every extreme diet I ever followed eventually failed. It's sustainable. When you're eating enough food, you have energy for your workouts or even just to live your life. When you're not restricting your favorite foods, you don't feel deprived. When you're losing weight at a reasonable pace, that's when you're more likely to keep it off. I've maintained a healthy weight for close to 3 years, eating closer to 2,400 calories a day whenever I'm just trying to maintain my weight. That's because I built habits that I can actually live with, not some extreme plan I could only follow for a few weeks or maybe even stick out for a few months. Look, I know this isn't as exciting as promising that you'll lose 10 pounds in 10 days. But if you're tired of the yo-yo cycle and you're ready for results that actually last, this is exactly how you do it. But you have to calculate the right calories and protein for you. Let me show you how. Tracking macros isn't as hard as it sounds, especially since you only have to pay attention to 2 numbers in order to make fat loss easy, which we'll talk about in a minute. Before you can track macros, you have to figure out the right macros for you. Because while I can tell you that I eat 2,000 calories to lose fat, that doesn't mean 2,000 calories will work for you. If you haven't put the work into building your metabolism, eating 2,000 calories a day could destroy your results. To figure out the right calorie goal, click over to the simple macro calculator. I'll include the link in the description to make things easy. Then enter your stats. Once you land on the page, scroll down until you get to the macro calculator. Pick which unit of measurement you want to use. I'll choose pounds since I'm in the US, and kilograms are just plain confusing for anyone on this side of the pond. Next, I click female, and then toggle down to my current weight, which right now sits around 155 pounds. When you fill in this part, make sure you're using a recent weight, because if it's been a few months since you last weighed yourself, your weight could be higher than you think. In order for this plan to work, you need to be accurate. Next, toggle to your height, which hopefully hasn't changed. Although at one time I was 5'8", so people can definitely shrink, or just have really bad posture. Scroll to your age, which, don't tell anyone, I hit the big 4'5" this year. I mean, don't tell anyone who doesn't watch my videos because they probably already know. Once we hit the section about how much do you work out per week, be honest. Oh, this describes me. I definitely bust out at least an hour every day.
Be honest.
Okay, so maybe not every day because sometimes I sleep in.
Be honest.
Alright, so I really fall into 1 to 3 hours a week category.
Thank you.
You want to be honest with yourself here and base this on your current level of activity. Because I've had many a client who told themselves that they'd start some vigorous exercise plan next week, but never follow through, which left them wondering why their macros didn't work. Even if you do follow through, then come back and change this after a few weeks of your newfound love of activity. As for me, I walk every day at a moderate pace for around an hour, and I'm in the gym 3 times a week for somewhere around 90 minutes, which puts me in the a ton category. But I still like to be conservative, so I'll choose a lot. You have 3 choices in the next section. Even though my current goal is to build lean muscle, which is amazing because that means I get to eat so much more. Since this is a fat loss video, let's choose loose fat, also known as a cut. Once you click on that, some numbers show up. The first one is your BMR, or basal metabolic rate. This number tells you how many calories you burn with 0 activity. So if all you do is lie in bed all day, you could eat 1,385 calories and still maintain your current weight. The next number is your TDEE, or total daily energy expenditure. This is a number that guesses how many calories your body burns each day based on how much activity you put into the calculator. Right now, mine is showing at 2354. If I go back up here and change my activity level to none, which is sedentary, then you can see that number jumps down to 1,592. That's why it is so important to be active. You can eat way more while dieting than someone who's sedentary, which makes sticking to your plan way easier. When we think about a diet in terms of a long-term strategy rather than a quick fix to lose weight fast, it is so much easier to eat closer to 2,000 calories every day than it is to struggle through a measly 1,200 calorie plan. Plus, activity has so many other benefits that it is foolish not to start adding more activity to your lifestyle moving forward. Let's put that back up to a lot in order to finish the example. We're not done yet, since if I estimated my activity correctly, that means if I eat 2,354 calories a day, I'd simply maintain my current weight. So I want to keep scrolling down to where it tells me which macros to consume if I want to lose weight, which in this example, I do. And this is where so many people throw in the towel on macros, because not only are all of these numbers confusing, but trying to hit these exact numbers every day seems impossible. And unless you have your diet very dialed in, it's not possible. Before I talk about which numbers you should focus on, let me adjust this just a little. Since this is a bodybuilding macro site, these macros look good if your purpose is to gain a lot of muscle while leaning out. But I'm guessing that's not your goal, at least not yet. Give it a few months in this lifestyle and you may completely change your mind. But for now, let's assume that you just want to lose some jiggle around your middle. The calorie deficit shows as a 20% deficit, which is great. That's right where you want to be for a moderate calorie deficit, so just leave that number alone. Don't be tempted to raise that number for a faster fat loss, since 9.99 times out of 10, that strategy backfires, leaving you fatter than when you started. You have to have patience and do this the right way if you want results that actually stick. The right way being eating in a moderate calorie deficit for more sustainable long-term results, instead of rushing the process with a more drastic deficit. The protein automatically adjusts to 40% of calories from protein, shown here at 188 grams. Which sounds like a lot of protein, mostly because it is. It's absolutely possible to eat that much protein, especially since I hit that number some days without even trying. But if you're just starting out, that's not a number that you'll even get close to on day one. While getting 40% of calories from protein is really great for fat loss, it is too high of a goal if you're just getting started. Don't set yourself up for failure by setting goals that are too hard to reach. So let's adjust that to somewhere between 30 to 35%. I personally think the higher the better, since protein leaves you feeling fuller. But remember, this is a number that you have to work up to. So don't think that you've failed your diet if you don't hit your protein goal right away. If you're not getting anywhere close to whatever your 35% of protein number is, you can lower this number even more to somewhere around 30%. But you still have to understand that setting your protein goal lower, that doesn't mean that you'll automatically hit it on day one. You have to practice for a few days or maybe even a few weeks before you'll start hitting that number on a consistent basis. When it comes to a sustainable diet, progress is always the goal, since aiming for perfection just results in another yo-yo diet. For me, I'll go ahead and adjust my protein goal to 35%, putting me at 165 grams of protein per day. Even though 165 grams is my goal, even if I only get to 100 grams of protein that day, that is still a big win. Just keep tracking and continue working out ways to add more protein without going over your calories, and eventually you'll get there. I just made this video which shows you exactly how to do that, so I'll link that at the end of this video in case you need help figuring that part out. When you begin prioritizing protein with meals and snacks, getting close to that number gets so much easier, I promise. Just have patience with yourself and remember that this is a lifestyle, not another diet that you need to rush into for immediate results. You probably noticed that the carbs and fat levers moved when I adjusted protein down to 35%. That's because if you eat less protein, you gotta make that difference up through some other macro. Remember when I told you that you only have to pay close attention to 2 numbers in order to make this kind of plan work? That's mostly true, since as long as you stay close to your calorie goal most days, and you keep working to hit that protein target, that is all you need macro-wise to work towards your fat loss goal, which means you can almost completely forget about tracking carbs and fat if it's too confusing tracking all of these numbers at the same time. The way I eat while in a calorie deficit is I aim to be at or under my calorie goal, I strive to hit my protein target, and then I just let carbs and fat fall into place based on foods I know will fill me up and give me energy. My macros are typically balanced with 35% of calories coming from protein and somewhere around 30 to 35% each from carbs and fat. Since I want to keep this simple, I don't really track carbs or fat. All I do is focus on the foods that keep me fuller longer, which for me usually means less carbs early in the day with more nutrient-dense carbs like potatoes or brown rice at night. While you don't have to pay much attention to hitting these numbers, you do want to make sure you're getting at least 25% of calories from healthy fats most days. That's important since fat is necessary for balanced hormones. So while you don't have to obsess over carbs or fats, just look at that fat number every once in a while to make sure you're hitting somewhere around 25% of calories from fat, or even more if that's what makes you feel better. Staying consistent with tracking calories and protein every day will take you a long way in your fat loss journey. It may not be as quick as you'd like, but if you stick with tracking these 2 numbers while analyzing your results every few weeks, that makes up 80 to 90% of your progress. But none of this works if you don't start your day on the right track. Try this easy routine. Spending the first hour of the day is exactly what sets you up for success for the 23 hours that follow. So in this video, I'll show you 5 morning habits that jumpstart an effective fat loss routine. And I know these habits work since they're the same habits that helped me lose 50 pounds even after nothing else worked. But in order to find the most success with your morning routine, you've got to get started the moment your eyes pop open. Once my eyes pop open at 6 a.m., the first thing I do is put on my watch and grab my phone. Then I head to the bathroom, step on the scale for my daily measurements, and get dressed in the workout clothes I set out the night before. While I do take my phone out of airplane mode, it's only so my weight and body fat percentage populate in the app. But once I'm done with that, I don't pick up my phone for at least the next hour. At least not to check email or social media. I do make an exception to turn on my favorite podcast during morning activity, but more on that in a minute. But the old me, who always struggled with her weight, she was a much different story, because that me rolled over in bed and immediately began scrolling even before my eyes were fully open. And before I knew it, the pitter-patter of tiny feet down the stairs, which meant it was time to get up and start the day. But I'd already lost an hour of me time catching up with people that I haven't even talked to in 20 years. And honestly, I didn't even really like them much back then. When most people pick up their phone to scroll social media, even for just a few minutes, sometimes an hour can fly by without you even realizing it. Not only that, but scrolling social media first thing floods your brain with dopamine spikes that actually affect your hunger, focus, and willpower for the rest of the day. So even though hourly it looks like you're just wasting valuable time, when we look at the whole picture, it's so much worse. That's because these early morning dopamine spikes make it harder to control cravings, making it harder to stick to your goals. Which means if you want to start your day on the right track, don't even look at email or social media for at least the first hour. If you need something to pass the time while drinking coffee, you can get a head start on logging your meals for the day, or even just sit in silence for a few minutes so you start the day with a clear mind. Or you can even follow this next morning habit, yes, even while drinking coffee. After regaining 50 pounds once keto and fasting stopped working, there's one big change I made to my mornings that made it easier to make better choices for the rest of the day. And that change started the night before when I began setting out my clothes for a morning walk. Because immediately getting dressed in workout clothes made it clear to my brain that walking first thing was a non-negotiable. And while I was out for these morning walks, I always passed the same people. There was the mid-40-something lady who walked her huskies first thing, because yes, somehow we have Siberian huskies in Arizona, and nothing screams Arizona like a breed designed to haul sleds through snowdrifts. And the lady who came to my house once for a play date, but I never invited back, since she just laughed as her son climbed the wrong slide of my water slide instead of telling him, "No, honey, that's dangerous and will make our new friend's homeowner's insurance skyrocket if you fall." And there was another cute couple, always walking side by side, coffee in hand. But you want to know what else I noticed about all of these people I passed by every morning? They were all in pretty decent shape. Like the kind of shape I struggled through diet after diet to get into, but never really stayed in for long. That's when it clicked. All of these people weren't in shape from dieting harder, they were just moving more. Which made it my new mantra to wake up every morning with a purpose. My purpose being to start the day with a burst of activity. So whether I only have time for a quick 10 to 15 minute walk, or I walk the whole neighborhood, I've made it a habit to always get active first thing, which made it way easier to achieve my goal since morning activity improves insulin sensitivity, enhances fat oxidation, and it sets the tone for a healthy day. But even if you don't have time for a walk first thing, you can wake up just a few minutes early for a quick mobility session or to complete 2 or 3 minutes of bodyweight exercises like push-ups or squats. And even though getting in a few minutes of activity is way better than time spent scrolling, there's another morning habit you should do before getting active that makes fat loss so much easier. But if you're still following all of the latest hacks to lose weight fast, you could easily screw this one up just like I did. Back when I was into all things fasting, I continued pushing my fast longer whenever my weight stalled. And once fasting up to 24 hours a day stopped working, I had to figure out new ways to get my scale to move. So I started dry fasting to see if that was the trick I needed. And I did lose weight. But what I didn't understand back then is weight loss and fat loss aren't the same thing. So when I completely dehydrated my body for up to 18 hours a day with a dry fast, which is a fast where you completely abstain from both food and water, of course my scale went down. But that wasn't fat loss. It was just a water weight drop from dehydration. But over time, these fasts wrecked my energy, triggered migraines, and led to even more weight gain. But the thing I really wish I knew back then was that getting tone had nothing to do with what the scale said, which meant taking extreme measures to get the scale to drop wasn't helping me with my goal of a strong, healthy body. I've since come to my senses, starting every morning with a tall bottle of water, which is important since most people wake up dehydrated, and dehydration can actually slow fat loss. So whether you're following some new fitness fad, or you're just not in the habit of hydrating first thing, this is a morning habit you'll want to add to your routine, especially since drinking water helps fire up your metabolism, it reduces water retention, and it flushes out toxins, which is especially important whenever you're trying to lose fat. But sometimes just drinking water isn't enough for proper hydration, which is the reason I add sea salt, especially around times I'm most active. And even though getting active first thing was a huge step towards achieving a healthy weight, I soon learned that I could push my results to a whole new level with this next morning habit. Since you're already getting active first thing, this is an easy habit to fit into your morning with very little effort. Remember all of the people I passed by during my morning walks? Well, there was someone that I forgot to mention. There was always a woman out bright and early, making the most of her walk, moving briskly while pumping her arms. Except she wasn't really making the most of her time since she always wore sunglasses, which may not seem like a big deal if you don't understand the benefit of early morning light. Here's the thing. Your circadian rhythm controls everything from energy levels to hunger hormones. And if you happen to be a mid-40s woman like me, I'm willing to bet your sleep isn't quite as sound as it could be. Actually, before implementing this morning habit, my sleep was an absolute train wreck, with me waking up most nights at 2 a.m. struggling to fall back asleep. But I soon learned that getting natural sunlight into your eyes within the first 30 minutes of waking helps balance cortisol, which also balances stress, which is important since less stress equals less belly fat. But that's not all, since it also improves insulin sensitivity, reduces cravings, and helps regulate your appetite. So once I began getting sunlight into my eyes for a few minutes each morning, sleeping through the night became so much easier. Plus, I was less hungry and had minimal cravings throughout the day. But I get it. We don't all live in Arizona, which averages 300 sunny days per year. If sunshine isn't readily available where you live, you can also use a 10,000 lux light therapy lamp, or even one of these bright screens that I use on the occasional cloudy day. Just 5 to 10 minutes of getting a bright light into your eyes first thing is one of the simplest things you can do to boost fat loss with almost zero effort. And while these first 4 morning habits will take you a long way, nothing was as big of a game changer as this last morning habit. But most people are so ingrained in their morning routine that's filled with grains that they don't even give this crucial habit a second thought. I know I didn't, especially back when I thought when weight loss only came down to slashing calories. And what's more calorie friendly than cereal, bagels, or toast? But if you're still relying on low-calorie breakfasts that are also high in carbs, that's the quickest way to crash your energy while storing more fat. Even when I switched to keto, sure, high-fat breakfasts help curb hunger, but I wasn't focused on protein, so I started losing muscle. In fact, there were long periods when I purposely kept protein low, since diet experts warned eating too much of it would keep me out of ketosis. While low-carb diets did help my scale drop, those big drops weren't all fat, because now I understand that most of the initial weight I lost was water. But the longer I stuck to low-protein plans meant I also began losing muscle. So even though these diets helped me achieve the big scale drops in the short term, I always regained everything I lost. But now that I understand that protein is the key to keeping muscle while losing fat, I always aim for a minimum of 30 grams of protein with my first meal. And no, you don't need a Michelin star breakfast. I've eaten cold chicken out of a Ziploc bag and called that a win. Hitting this morning target sets me up to easily hit 150 grams of protein per day, which keeps me fuller on less calories, making it easy to achieve consistent fat loss month after month. So let's quit all of the low fat versus low carb debates and instead start your day with at least 30 grams of protein within 90 minutes of waking up. Great options I use are nutrient-packed protein shakes, Greek yogurt, or I heat up last night's leftovers. Like today, I reheated 4 ounces of grilled chicken, tossed it with some barbecue sauce, and layered it on top of my favorite veggies, plus an ounce of sour cream mixed with ranch dressing. Even though it's not your run-of-the-mill breakfast, who makes the rules of what you can eat and when? This took 5 minutes and kept me full through lunch. Adding this simple habit to your morning routine will keep you full for hours, reduce cravings for the rest of the day, and it's an easy way to boost your metabolism, making fat loss easier. But remember, just because all of these habits seem easy enough, you never want to rush into a plan that overwhelms you on day one, because that's when you won't end up sticking to any of your new habits. But you can start improving your morning routine by picking one of these habits. Then take as much time as you need to get that habit down before moving on to the next. Before you know it, you'll have an entire daily routine you love that also comes with amazing results. Once you master your morning, build consistent habits over time, like these simple habits. Lasting weight loss has nothing to do with extreme diets and everything to do with daily habits that create a sustainable lifestyle. So in this video, I'll share 17 small but powerful habits that help me lose 50 pounds without starving myself or spending hours in the gym. But how did I finally break free from decades of dieting while easily maintaining my results with a lifestyle that feels effortless? If you want real, lasting results, you have to block out all of that diet noise like low carb, low fat, and low calorie, since none of that matters as much as getting your priorities straight. Even though most diets force you to cut out everything you love, I didn't find lasting success until I shifted my focus to adding more of one thing. Now, every time I eat, the first question I ask is, where's my protein? Once I made protein the star of every meal, fat loss got easier since it keeps you fuller longer. It also helps you maintain muscle while losing fat, and eating more protein naturally controls cravings. These days, I build every meal around lean meats like chicken, turkey, and beef, or even high-protein non-meat options like Greek yogurt, cheese, and eggs. This strategy keeps me fuller longer on less calories, which is what's necessary to maintain the moderate deficit that triggered my 50-pound fat loss. So instead of cutting out everything you love, start asking, where's my protein? Every time you eat. This is one small habit that'll make a huge difference in your progress. But filling up on protein during the day is only half the battle. While I do eat more of what I want as long as I stay on track with my protein target, I found it much easier to stick to my calorie goal whenever I skipped sugary treats throughout the day. I used to grab a few squares of chocolate after lunch or enjoy protein pancakes for breakfast, thinking that I could make it fit. But I soon realized that eating any sugar before filling up on whole food protein only led to cravings for the rest of the day. Once I began saving sweet treats for dessert, I was able to enjoy them guilt-free while easily sticking to my calorie goals. Since I'm eating some of my favorite foods, I never feel deprived, but saving them until the end of the day keeps cravings under control. If you struggle with cravings, focus on eating more high-protein foods throughout the day. If you do want a treat, save it until after dinner to make it easier to stay on track with your calorie goals, which even tracking calories in the first place is something that a lot of people call obsessive. But you want to know what's actually obsessive? Cutting out every carb, only eating meat, or forcing yourself to fast for 20 plus hours a day. For years, I tried all of the extreme diets only to end up frustrated, sick, and exhausted, which led to me regaining every pound I worked so hard to lose. Then I realized I never needed to cut out entire food groups. I just needed balance. Once I began tracking my meals, I got to eat everything I love while leaning out with a habit that takes less than 10 minutes a day. So if tracking helps you lose weight while eating foods you love, that doesn't sound obsessive. It sounds smart. Speaking of obsessive, I used to spend hours doing cardio thinking that was the key to fat loss. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. While cardio is great for overall health, it's overhyped for burning fat. Once I shifted my focus to building muscle instead of burning calories, that's when my body really changed. And here's the thing, you don't need to spend hours in the gym to build lean muscle. Even just taking 15 minutes a day to do 1 or 2 exercises is enough to boost your metabolism and get results. So instead of wasting another hour on the treadmill, add 15 minutes of strength training instead. Even though this approach will take a little longer to see results, this is a tiny habit that compounds over time to help you grow your health investment instead of one that only leads to diminishing returns. But that doesn't mean I spend 15 minutes lifting and then turn into a potato for the rest of the day. While strength training is great, staying active throughout the day is just as important. When I began tracking steps a few years ago, I realized that I was only getting 2,000 to 3,000 steps a day. Even though I thought I was active since I worked out daily, I learned that I was still considered sedentary. This motivated me to get my step count up to 10,000 per day. But I didn't do it overnight. Instead, I started with a 10-minute walk each day. Then I began adding short walks after meals while also becoming more mindful of more movement throughout the day. These days, I hit my step goal without even thinking about it. But I get it. Going from sedentary to 10,000 steps a day seems overwhelming. But if you start by adding just one 10-minute walk, that instantly adds 1,000 steps to your daily count. Then find ways to add an additional 10 minutes of activity each week until being more active just becomes part of your life. But even though increasing activity is a must when it comes to achieving your goals, what you eat still accounts for up to 90% of your results. The hard way after falling into the diet food trap for decades. I'd always stock up on low-calorie, processed diet foods that make me hungry an hour later. Now that I eat mostly real whole foods like lean proteins, fruits and veggies, and even more whole grains, my portion sizes are bigger, even though I'm eating less calories. And this simple swap helps me stay fuller for longer. If you still rely on food marketers to tell you which foods fit into your diet, ditch these highly processed diet-friendly foods for more real food instead. Making this one change is the easiest way to control hunger to make it easier to stick to your macro targets. Even though this next tiny tweak sounds too simple to work, science backs it up. Studies show that eating protein first can reduce glucose spikes by up to 37%. This is a big deal since this helps slow digestion and prevent energy crashes. It also controls cravings while reducing overeating, and this simple swap keeps you fuller for longer. Once I started eating protein before moving on to carbs like rice or potatoes, I felt fuller on less calories while experiencing fewer cravings later that day. Next time you eat, try starting your meals with protein before moving on to carbs and see if it makes a difference. Even with protein-packed meals, cravings still happen, but grabbing whatever's available is a quick way to derail your progress. That's why I always keep high-protein snacks on hand, like Greek yogurt, beef jerky, rolled up deli meat, and cheese sticks. Make this easy for yourself by stocking up on grab-and-go protein snacks so you're never caught hungry and unprepared. Which means it's also a good idea to establish this next tiny habit. The old "I'm always on a diet" me never had a plan, so I grabbed whatever seemed like a healthy choice in the moment. The truth is, it usually wasn't healthy. Since I still don't love spending hours each week prepping my food, I've come up with my own lazy meal prep hack where I double my dinner recipe. Whenever I cook taco meat, I make extra for tostados, nachos, taco salads, or even a Mexican pizza for lunch later that week. If I'm grilling chicken, I make extra for lunch wraps or a high-protein breakfast scramble. Even though doubling dinner takes no extra effort, it makes sticking to your goals 10 times easier. Another benefit to cooking less often meant less back pain, which held me back for years. Because after spending most mornings getting more active, by mid-afternoon, I was done, spending way too much time on sedentary activities like scrolling my phone. But once I discovered the right stretches that instantly took away my pain, everything changed. Now I start every morning with 15 minutes of stretching and a quick mobility session anytime I feel tight. Even just 5 minutes of stretching makes me feel like a new person, helping me remain active all day. If pain is slowing you down, commit to a few minutes of daily stretching. This makes it easier to achieve your goals since being too sedentary will slow down your results. Something else I did way too much while working through the pain was order dinner out, which caused my scale to jump all over the place, making me feel like I wasn't making progress, especially since the old me always ordered whatever I craved. While I still eat out a few times each week, now I make smarter choices. I start by prioritizing meals packed with protein and veggies like fajitas or a grilled chicken salad. While I still enjoy carbs, I save them for the end of my meal. That way, I only have a few bites of rice or a handful of chips instead of eating the entire basket. And I always stop halfway through my meal to check how I feel, so I never end up eating until it's too late and I'm stuffed. If you eat out on your diet, do your best to fill up on protein before indulging in extras, which will help you enjoy the meal without sabotaging your progress. Following this next tiny habit raised my energy while making it easier to stick to a calorie deficit. Because before starting this habit, there were many times that I thought I was hungry, but I was actually just dehydrated. To avoid false hunger cues, I keep a bottle of cold water next to me all day. I also add electrolytes before, during, and after activity, since electrolytes play a big role in hydration. Always keeping water nearby reminds me to sip regularly instead of waiting until I'm thirsty, and as well to avoid drinking too much with meals, which isn't a good idea since drinking too much while eating can wash away digestive enzymes that help break down food. So while it is important to hydrate throughout the day, remember to only sip lightly during meals for better digestion and fewer cravings. Since keeping this bottle next to me reminds me to drink, that's one fat loss habit I never have to track. When it comes to other important metrics that help me achieve my goal, that's another story. I never leave the habits that actually move the needle to chance, since you can't measure what you don't track. And if you don't have an accurate way to measure your results, how will you know if your plan's even working? That's the reason I always track calories, protein, daily activity, and my weekly weight trends whenever I'm in a fat loss phase. Taking 5 minutes to track these simple metrics is what helped me lose 50 pounds. And I still use this simple system daily since it's what helps me maintain my weight. If you're not in the habit of tracking, then pick 3 key habits that impact your fat loss the most and track them daily. You'll be surprised at how much consistency improves when you pay close attention to what really matters. Keeping this goal tracker also helps with this next habit, which is focusing on how far I've come instead of dwelling on how much further I have to go. Let's be real. There will be plenty of times that you'll feel stuck, but seeing just how far I've come whenever I feel frustrated motivates me to keep going. Taking 5 minutes to log today's data allows me to look back at months or even years of progress in just a few minutes. I can instantly see how many inches I've lost, how much stronger I've gotten, and how quickly even those half-pound weekly losses add up to real progress. I even have a progress photo tab to see how all of these numbers translate into real results. Even if you haven't started a goal tracker of your own, take time now to write down 3 small wins you've had over the past month. This will instantly motivate you since you're probably making more progress than you think. My goal tracker has also been a game changer since it taught me that sustainable fat loss isn't about being perfect. It's about being patient. Like most dieters, I used to obsess over big weight drops. Whenever my scale didn't drop at least 2 pounds in a week, I thought that I was doing something wrong. But that mindset kept me stuck. Once I realized that losing even half a pound a week still adds up over time, that's when everything changed. That's when I finally figured out that small, steady losses are what actually leads to lasting results. This helped me realize that even imperfect progress is progress, and sustainable habits always work better than diet extremes. So instead of searching for another diet that's too strict to follow, focus on staying consistent with the right habits and your results will come. But also be aware that sometimes being too consistent can even be a bad thing, which is something that I had to learn the hard way. For months, I thought that working out more meant faster results. Reality hit once my energy dropped, my progress stalled, and I suffered an injury that almost kept me out of the gym for months. While I still train hard, I also rest hard because I finally learned that rest and recovery is just as important for building muscle as your actual workout. So no matter how motivated you are, remember that rest days aren't lazy, they're necessary. If it feels like you train hard but you're not making much progress, chances are you're doing too much. Believe it or not, you'll get better results when you include more active recovery days. I know I did. The final tiny habit I followed just might be the most important of all. The girl you see here, who constantly struggled with her weight, was always starting over with some new diet that was guaranteed to work. It wasn't until I removed the phrase, "I'll just start Monday," from my vocabulary that I finally got permanent results. That's when I realized that one bad meal doesn't ruin all of my hard work, since it's actually all of the decisions I make after that meal that determine my results. If I go off track now, I just jump right back into my routine. There's no more guilt and no drama. I just make the next right choice. When you shift from an all or nothing mindset to just making the next right choice after veering off course, that's when you finally get lasting results. While each habit alone is small, together they build a lifestyle that makes weight loss effortless. If you're ready for the full system I use to lose 50 pounds, watch this video next. I break down the exact routine I follow to make weight loss simple, sustainable, and easy to maintain, taking you through every step of the system I use.